Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for being here today. We have Leah and Laura from New Strong, and I thought maybe you guys could talk just a little bit about where you were yesterday, just to give us some context to this conversation that we are going to talk about how our community can handle all the things that we're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, what an unfortunate place to be, and just a really hard day. My family was at the parade, but we were quite a bit north and had already gotten back to the hotel that we were at when we were watching the speeches, and then heard all the ambulance and stuff outside of our hotel room, before we headed home and started having some conversations and answering questions from our kiddos. So
And how old are your kids, Leah?
I have a 10, I have a 7, 5.
Okay.
And obviously all had different reactions and different questions and trying to balance all of that. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I was supposed to be with Leah. Our families were going to be down there. We did that last year. But we had a Valentine's Day party and it's my husband's birthday. So I was in the middle of a Valentine's Day party when another mother was sharing this information in front of 4 and 5-year-olds. So a very different experience, and trying to kind of, which we'll talk about today, just like in the midst of that, trying to figure out a plan with shocking information and also little ones around. Yeah.
So I think first, which I think I've heard from a lot of moms I've just, talked with in the last 24 hours, we're not okay yet. What is how do you talk to your kids who need you right now, but you're not in a great place either in processing and still kind of thinking through everything that you're feeling?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Laura.
Well, I just think, we have to kind of do the pause, right? So regulation is key here, but how do we get regulated? We get regulated by safety. And what are we experiencing? We're not experiencing safety, right? We're in the midst of experiencing fear. There's been all of these posts of we can't go to church, we can't go to the grocery store, we can't go to school, we can't go to a parade without the fear of something, terrible happening. And so really, I think, how are we finding those small little safety pieces? Like what makes us feel safe? Like right now I have my heater on because that literally makes me feel safe. I took a bath at midnight last night. There are little moments that we need to tap into, like what brings us like that immediate safety and connected to self, to have just little bits of times of regulating. And then our kids are very attuned to being co-regulated by those little bits of moments of things too. So I mean, we could say all these things like, great, reflect and all that. We're not there yet. We are in DEFCON 5. We are in crisis. We need to find those small little wins. If it's a big fat Diet Coke, like regulate in a way that you can get a little quick safeties so that then those kiddos can feel a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too that it's okay for our kids to see that we are in pain, we are scared, and we are sad too. Oftentimes as parents we feel like we need to shield them from that, and we just really can't. This is our reality, this is where we're at. We cannot shield our kids from trauma, from loss, part of life, and them seeing that we are struggling actually gives them permission to open up themselves. So I think it's just really important to know that we don't have to be the superhero, that we can say, yes, this is scary and this is hard and this makes mommy sad.
Mhm.
And we're in it together.
So you kind of mentioned shielding. I've seen a lot of advice from various places of, you need to turn off the news. We need to, kids don't need to see this, which I think it's a different conversation when it didn't happen in your community with people you might know. What is your advice for kids that maybe aren't in school yet? So they're not going to necessarily hear it from peers or teachers, they might not. Do we need to address it with them? And then is it just the kids who were there that we should address with, or what if they were at home? How do we handle that?
Well, I think we could equate that, and then Leah, I'll have you piggyback on that. A lot of our kiddos have siblings, and those siblings can be in different ages, and that information will be shared. And if we can equate this almost to like the sex talk, right? We want to be able to share that information from our value system, how we believe it, what we think about that. And that information is super precious, and it should be given from us. It should always be coming. Like, they learn and they understand and they trust when that information is coming from us. So I think, Leah, you can kind of piggyback on, the answer. My answer would be yes, we do have to share that information. Now a 3-year-old looks very different, of even conceptualizing that. And that can look like a bad thing happened yesterday. Everyone who's in charge, like police officers and healthcare workers, are keeping us safe. We have people that are watching out for us, and it looks different developmentally. But Leah, why don't you go ahead? Because I know you probably have some thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I mean, again, we cannot shield our children from this. This is in our community. The news is everywhere. There's people everywhere talking about it. It's on our hearts. They can feel the energy, even if you're in a home where you don't want to communicate. They know your energy. Kids are smarter than what we think, and they can feel that. And so I feel, like Laura said, we need to give the facts. Forward, we need to give the facts. And whatever that is developmentally, like a 3-year-old, you're not going to give a bunch of facts to, right?
Right.
But give the facts and then answer their questions. When they have questions, answer them to your best of your ability. My son last night was, well, what did they have children? What happened? Why was she there? I mean, all these questions, right? And that if we don't put the answers to the ... at the end of the question, we are storytellers in our brain. And if we don't put the end to it, then they're going to go worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just how our children's brains work. Now, limiting the amount of news intake would probably be a good suggestion, but you cannot shield them from all of it, right? We are still processing. We're going to hear it. It's going to be on the news. It's going to be everywhere. And I think with teens, you definitely want to watch it with them, right? They're going to see it. They have it on their phone. Watch it with them so you can be the one that's guiding the conversation.
Yeah. I think I talked about a little bit with my kids of we don't know all the facts yet because it all comes in. And one of the moms on our team said her son got a text from a friend who said the IRS building was under attack and it was terrorism.
Yep.
And so it's a good time to teach about, news consumption, but I mean, it definitely is everywhere and they have access to all this information that we probably didn't as
kids. 100%. Yeah. My 10-year-old is on a little text chain and he's the same thing. It was, they're okay. It was just they make these stories to make them sound, they just make them bigger and better and whatever, and more difficult, more hard. And if we don't have the answers or don't give them the answers, then that's what's going to happen.
So I think one of the shifts in my house was the initial viewing of it. But then when all the Children's Mercy information came out, I feel like there was a shift in how my kids were consuming that information. My 8-year-old asked, what does a gunshot wound look like? And she could recite this morning. There were 11 kids at Children's Mercy and 9 were shot. And just knew all the information. How does that, I feel like that changed for her, consuming it when there were kids. And then when there was the one who died was a mom.
Yeah.
It was different than other conversations we've had about news events. How do you think kids are processing the fact that kids and a mom were involved, and how do we address that well?
It's just so heavy. Yeah, I think it hits home harder for them, right? This could have been me. This could have been my mom. This could have been, and so I think just reframing the story for them that yes, this big scary thing did happen and kids were involved, and that is super scary, super hard and super sad. There are people that are out there that are protecting us and trying to keep us safe. and responded and ran to the danger, and they were there, and there's healthcare providers that are helping all of us, and mommy and daddy are going to continue to do everything we can to keep you safe. Right. So that reassurance, that reframing for them. I don't know, Laura, you want to add some?
Yeah, I think the reframing, and I think it's also just understanding, going back to that safety. How do we practice safety in our home? How are we grounding ourselves? Right. So it's like information, Sarah, like you said, we're educating with our own parenting narrative, controlling some of that. We're reviewing what do we do in our household when we have a feeling around that, or what is that feeling, right? And then we're kind of getting to that space where it's okay for these kiddos to question, get curious, and wonder, but that there's also plans in place. What do we as a family do? This is a time. What do we as a family do if we are at an event and something like this occurs? We're going to practice. We're going to talk about. We're going to discuss. And I hate that that is the reality, but it is also a way to provide a plan of safety to kind of contain the anxiety and the worry and so it's not so big. We've got some steps that we are going to do. Yeah. I also think it's an invitation to give them little time. So what can they do? What can Braxton do? Can Braxton write a card to Children's Mercy and think it's going to get to the kids? Can we volunteer in the Ronald McDonald House? What are those little wins that our kiddos can do to feel like they're contributing to problem solving and getting to the end? And I think that's a really big piece that can give us a sense of control. And when we have that, what'd you say, Leah?
But in a time where we don't feel like we have any control,
100%. Yeah.
Like any wins that we can give our kids, that ability to feel like they are in control of something, right? Is going to help manage that anxiety.
Yeah.
So on the safety, my 12-year-old didn't go because he hates crowds and gets anxiety, which I know. So the first thing he said when we got home was, "I'm never going. This is why I didn't want to go. I'm never going to a thing like that," which I've heard from other moms too.
Yeah.
But there will be a time when we will have to, or will choose to, go back to Union Station or go to a parade or a crowded place. Like, we also know we can't live our lives in our house.
Yeah.
So how do we make our kids feel safe when as adults we also know we can't control, and this is actually the reality they're growing up in, at least for now?
I think that right there where you said for now, right now we don't have to, right? We don't have to go to a parade today or tomorrow or the next day, and eventually taking it day, but this is a grieving process, right? Like, we're grieving all of this, and so taking it day by day to ensure and just meet them where they're at. Like, I don't want to go to a parade right now, so right now we're not going to. And providing, again, I think that safety piece that keeps talking about, like, reassurance and that, and reframing that. You want to add that, Laura?
Well, and I think too, Sarah, like when we experiencing something so uncomfortable, and Leah talked about sitting in this uncomfortable feeling of like that this is how our kids are growing up, we want to do absolutes. We will never do that. I will never put my kids there. I will never leave my home. I wish COVID was happening again so I could stay in the bubble, right? Not really, but right?
Yeah.
And so the extremes happen because we don't know how to process the gray. And that's okay, because it is, like Leah said, it's a step by step. Like, it is going to ebb and flow. We are in a grieving process of going, we didn't grow up this way. Our parents didn't grow up this way. How do we parent in this way? So we are in that grieving process. And I think it's okay to say today, like Leah said, we are not going to do that. But I think, again, going back to what is our family going to do as far as our safety? Like, like a tornado drill, unfortunately, what are we going to assure that our family, that we know our steps, we know our roles, and that if we are in a public place and one of our family members becomes acutely aware or becomes uncomfortable enough, then what is that step? Are we deciding we're going to leave that event, or are we going to not be on the front line if we're going to, like, there's lots of wiggle room to kind of play with. How are we going to not live into the fear, but live with the fear?
Well, I think our kids, for better or worse, are probably better at that than us because they're doing these drills at school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is, I mean, that's spot on. And just sitting with them, like, gosh, that's the biggest part, is just validating. This is hard, and I don't have the 1, 2, 3s to fix this, and I don't have the ability to put you in a bubble and protect. Like, just sitting in that discomfort is so huge, so that we can move through it. So much we want to like plow through it, and then we rob our kids of the ability to build those resilient skills to bounce back. Like, we have to sit in it, which is really hard.
So before we jumped on here, we kind of were talking about, I think our fix-it reaction is wanting to jump into, gun reform and the politicized, aspects of this situation, which, I mean, we all, personally have, strong feelings about, but is there a reason to resist jumping right to that? Like, is there space in between that we need to allow? Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think that if we think about it as a grieving process, then we need to think about it that it's important to have a process. So while at the end of the day, I'm assuming that a lot of us have very big thoughts about that and feel like there's some actionable steps that need to be taken. Right now, we are in a space of grieving, and we need to fully experience that grief, even as uncomfortable as it is, so that we can get to the other side with a clear head, with a mission that's going to be actionable, that's not going to be emotional based, right? And if we can do that, then we can actually have some reform. We can actually have some steps that might be taken, for maybe just Kansas City, if it can't get farther. Right. But I think if we're not paying attention to our emotions and we're just trying to do an action, we're just trying to push down that uncomfortable feeling and the fear and the pain. And that doesn't tend to serve us well in the end. So I think it's okay to sit in this space and also know that we will get to these other things. And Sarah, I think you kind of mentioned it is different when it's right here in our face, right? So if we are from, Minnesota, and we are going straight to gun reform and actual things, that makes sense because you don't have that emotional tie necessarily. But we as Kansas Cityans right now went on a huge roller coaster yesterday of highs and then extreme lows. Yeah. And I think that it's okay for us to just take a pause to reflect before we move forward to make some action that occur.
I talked to our counterpart in Boston, and they wrote a letter from a Boston mom to a Kansas City mom and talked about the Boston Marathon and that tragedy and what it was like to go from celebration and something that's iconic to your city and that feeling of like community to just like have be destroyed, and being able to hold this was a great day and joy and celebration, and we love Kansas City and we love the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Also, like, this also happened.
Yeah.
And being able to process through that, which I think is a lot. It's a lot for an adult.
It's a lot.
Yeah. It's a lot for an adult. It's a lot for kids, then we have, what's next year going to look like? You've got all those questions, right? Like how are the Chiefs players feeling, and I think it's good what Leah said of like today. Like today is what we're concerned about. Today we're keeping our kids safe. Today those kids are at Children's Mercy, which is a phenomenal hospital, and they are getting treated with top of the line individuals and doctors. There's 800 or 900 plus police officers there. Like Leah said, running to the crowd, running through and to danger. We did the steps, and we can do that today, and we'll try again tomorrow, and we'll try again the next day.
Well, ladies, I appreciate you, and
yes,
good luck in your own homes as you process this. And I appreciate all you're doing for the Kansas City community and help us process through it too.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. Happy to help.
We're here. So if there are questions, please don't hesitate to send them our way. And we just want to continue to provide resources and help you through the grieving process. So
we will share those as you guys work on that. And
okay.
we appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah.